Hey, thanks for joining us online today. We believe that Jesus wants to do so much through you and for you, and we'd love to hear about how he's working in your life. Please take a second to email your story to stories@rise-church.com. We hope this message leaves you feeling uplifted and encouraged. Enjoy.
Give it up for our incredible worship team. They're amazing. And I am just so glad you're here. I hope you got a yummy treat. There are so many more of you here in this room tonight than we expected, which is just incredible. But we're glad that you're here. I want to welcome you to Girls Only. If I've not had a chance to meet you yet, my name is Rebecca Peterson, and I get the privilege of being married to Pastor Adam here at Rise Church. He's the lead pastor here at Rise Church. And I get the privilege of being married to the preacher, which is a really cool gig. And he's here. I told him I wanted him to sit up front tonight because he is my little cheerleading squad over here. He's my encourager. And I wanted to just take a second to show you my family in case we don't know you. I know we're not in it, but we are the parents. But these are my three babies. That's my son Noah. He's 11. My daughter Naomi. She's right here on the front row with me tonight. And then that little middle nugget there is Emmy. She's just our tiny little bundle of joy. She's incredible. She's about to be 2 next week. And so that's my family. If I haven't gotten a chance to meet you, I hope I get to meet you tonight. I would love to. If you are here for the first time, welcome. We're so glad that you're here with us tonight. I would definitely love to meet any of our first-time guests. If you have a church home, that's awesome. We want you to be plugged in there. But if you don't have a church home and you're here for the first time, we'd love to share what your next steps could be here at Rise Church, getting you plugged in and connected. And I hope you'll come back and you'll maybe join us tomorrow. So we're going to dive into the message because I've got a lot I want to share tonight, and I know you might have a little note sheet on your seat. I hope you'll take some notes because if you're anything like me, you hear something and then you leave and you forget it. And so we got a lot going on in here, so I want you to take some notes tonight. And tonight I've entitled my message, How to Be Strong. And the title might even be a little bit misleading because being strong doesn't just have a magic formula, right? There's not just some secret sauce to being strong. But I want to share with you a little bit of the journey that I've been on. And I've lived a lot of my life thinking that strength was something that I had to achieve. Strength was something that I had to work really hard at. And if I wasn't strong, then it equated to my Christianity. And that meant that I wasn't a good Christian if I wasn't strong. And so I would admire people in my life that just showed great strength and think, man, they just must be really good Christians because they're really strong. And I've always had this very suck it up buttercup mentality. Anybody else say that phrase at all in their house? I mean, I say it to my kids. I'm like, you're hurt. Come on, suck it up, buttercup. You're good. Let's go. And I don't know if you have a man in your life at all that it just when they get hurt or when they get sick, it's like they're dying, right? It's like, I have a little cold and I'm going to be in bed for a week. And us women were like, I have the flu and I'm going to still get my kids dressed and out the door and I'm going to still go work my 9-to-5 job and I'm going to still grocery shop and accomplish everything. Come on. I think women might just be gifted a little bit more in that area. I'm just teasing if there's any men in the house. But I really can tend to project this in my life. I can project it onto my kids. I can project it onto my husband. Come on, just suck it up. Let's move on. And then I started to project it onto myself, right? You're fine, Rebecca. Just suck it up. Get it together. And then I started to think that that's how God spoke to me. That God was always just get it together. Stop acting that way. Stop being so down. Stop being so sad. Stop messing up all the time. Just suck it up and get it together. And I've been on this journey over the last year just trying to look at what does it mean to be strong? What does godly strength look like? And I realized that it doesn't look anything like what I thought that it did. And that having strength didn't mean that I couldn't have pain in my life. Having strength didn't mean that I couldn't mess up or have failures or have mistakes or have some grief. But that having a God-given strength meant that I could take the mess to the one who could clean it up. That I could take my hurts to my healer. And that having strength meant looking to Jesus to come and do some work on my life. And I want to look at 3 women in the Bible tonight, to me, that exemplify strength in some really unique ways. More than just a physical strength, but what we see in their stories is that God uses them despite what's gone on in their life, and he turns and uses them in really powerful ways. And so the first one we're going to look tonight at is Ruth. And Ruth is just my favorite biblical character. If you've never dove into the study of Ruth, I have an incredible study. It's not mine, but one that I've done, and it's amazing. And I love Ruth's life. She teaches us so much. And in the story of Ruth, if you read through the chapter of Ruth, we find Naomi. And Naomi is married, and she has 2 sons, and her sons are both married. And in a really short amount of time, she loses her husband, and she loses both of her sons, and she's left alone with herself and her daughters-in-law. And so she looks at them and she was like, girls, you're still young, you still have life left to live. Go back home to your parents and just leave me here. And one of her daughters-in-laws goes back home, but Ruth, her daughter-in-law, stays with her, and she says, I'm with you. I am stuck with you. I'm going to take care of you. I'm with you heart and soul. And so they begin to travel to another land where they hear that there's maybe some work and some opportunity for them to make some money and to survive. And so they travel to this land, and we find Naomi at home, bitter, angry, frustrated, and blaming God for everything that's happened in her life. She tells Ruth, don't even call me by my name anymore, just call me bitter because God has just destroyed me. Right? Have some of you ever felt like that in your life? Like, don't even call me by my name anymore, just call me bitter. This is just who I am. And so what we find Ruth, though, is she gets to work. She goes out into the field and she works. And she plows in the morning until the evening collecting grain, which was a dangerous job for women to do alone in those days. It was not a safe thing for her to do. And so rumors start going out around town that Ruth is a hard worker. And then they find out there's a man in town named Boaz, and that Boaz is an extended relative of theirs. And it's a really confusing thing, but in Bible times, if there was an extended relative and he could marry you, then you could continue on with the family line of your husband who had died. And so they find out that Boaz is here, and so Ruth goes and she keeps working hard, and then Boaz approaches her and he said, I have heard about you. I've heard how courageous you are. I've heard that you've been working hard from day and night. Come work in my field, and I'm going to protect you. I'm going to take care of you, and I'm going to provide you food and water for you and Naomi. And so she goes home and she tells Naomi, and she's like, listen, what happened? Boaz has heard about what's going on, and what Boaz basically is saying is, I've heard about your strong perseverance. I've heard about your strength. And so she tells Naomi, and let's look at what Naomi says, her response. She says, God bless that man. God has not walked out on us after all. He still loves us in good times in bad times as well as good. And so Ruth here continues to work hard and trust God and persevere. And what she does is she weathers her storm well. Because what I think about Ruth is that she probably still had a lot of grief. She probably was still hurting inside. But she didn't allow that grief to cripple her. She persevered and she positioned herself in a place to receive from God. She could have gone home. She could have complained. She could have been sitting there with Naomi saying, call me bitter. But what would have happened? She would have missed out on what God had for her. And her and Naomi likely would have starved to death. So she ends up marrying Boaz. And in the scripture, you keep reading on. It says that Boaz marries Ruth, and then all the elders of the town begin to speak prophetically over Ruth's life. They say, man, you are courageous. You have persevered. Your family line is now going to be blessed. Your children are going to be blessed. And she ends up having a son. And her son, if you travel down the genealogy line, goes all the way down to Jesus. Grief could have crippled Ruth, but she moved forward. And I did a Bible study years ago on Ruth, and one of the quotes of that study has stuck with me my whole life. They said, Ruth has shown us that it is possible to weep and to walk at the same time. That our grief and our circumstances don't have to cripple us, but we can continue to move forward one step at a time. I encourage you to go read the story of Ruth. It's just incredible. But next, I want to look at Mary Magdalene and how she models for us strong faith. Mary's mentioned several times in the Bible. It's not Mary, the mother of Jesus, but this Mary, it's mentioned that she was tormented by 7 demons at one time. And if I were to picture Mary and just how she was before she was healed from this, I imagine she was very disheveled. I imagine she was labeled as crazy in her town. I imagine that she was struggling and that she was just having a hard time keeping it together, but she's healed. She is delivered from these 7 demons. And in Luke 8, we first hear about Mary. It says, Jesus traveled from one town and village to another, proclaiming good news of the kingdom of God. The 12 were with him, that's the 12 disciples, and also some women. I love that there were women surrounding Jesus. And these women who had been cured of evil spirits and diseases, Mary, called Magdalene, from whom 7 demons had come out. So she's healed from these demons, from this torment. And the Bible tells us that Mary now becomes a devoted follower of Jesus. She is following him from town to town. It's also rumored in the Bible that Mary had money, and so she was able to support Jesus and provide for him. And what I love so much is that Mary's healed, and it would have been easy for her to just go on and do whatever she wanted to do with her life. She had money. She could have gone and gotten married and done whatever she wanted, but instead she chose to devote her life to the one who healed her. She loved Jesus, and she trusted in his work. She had a strong faith in him. Mary was there the moments that Jesus was convicted, the moments that Jesus carried his cross to Calvary. Mary was there as he was crucified, and she was the very one that took care of Jesus' body, that prepared his body to be placed in the tomb. And so Mary's also then the first one who goes to visit Jesus after he's died. And in Luke 24:8 it says, Mary goes, she visits him, and of course Jesus, we know he's not there, right? And the angel appears and says, he isn't here. He's not here in this place. And so then they, Mary and the women, remembered his words. They remembered Jesus' words, and they went back to the disciples saying, he isn't here. We saw an angel, and Jesus is not in the tomb. But the disciples, did not believe the women because their words seemed to them like nonsense. Peter got up, he ran to the tomb, he saw the strips of linen lying by themselves, and he went away wondering what had happened. So the women here, what do? They call to mind and they have faith and they say, no, we remember what Jesus said. And the men are like, what's going on? Jesus is gone. What's happening? The men lost their faith in that moment. They lost their faith in what had happened, but when the worst had happened and Jesus had died and his body is now gone, Mary's faith rose up in her. And she said, I remember what he said. I remember. And she then was able to be the mouthpiece to proclaim Jesus' life, to proclaim that he was alive, to proclaim the good news for the very first time. What a privilege she was given. Why? Because she had strong faith in Jesus. And some of you might feel like Mary. Maybe it's not a demon that's tormenting you, but maybe it's an addiction. It's a sin. It's a past. It's something that's going on in your life, and you feel stuck in this, and you feel like it's got such a hold on you. But let this be the thing that just launches you forward like Mary. She could have allowed her shame and her past and her guilt from what she had gone through in her life, her reputation, to hold her back. But instead she said, no, I'm going to have strong faith, and I'm going to proclaim the good news of what Jesus has done in my life. And the last woman I want to look at tonight is Rahab, and this is an incredible story. Also another one that's just got a ton of details surrounding it. But Rahab shows us strong courage. In the book of Joshua, we find God's people, the Israelites, and their leader is Joshua. And God sends Joshua to go take over the land of Jericho. And this is where Rahab lives. So Joshua sends some spies into the land to check it out first. Before they're going to go to battle, he sends these spies in, and they almost get caught by the men of Jericho, but they walk into Rahab's home. And Rahab is a prostitute. She's not living a life of godliness right now. And they walk into her home, and she says, wait, I've heard about you. I've heard about what God's wanting to do, that he's wanting to take over this area. She says, if I protect you here, if I keep you hidden in my house, will you spare me? Will you spare me? Will you spare my life? Will you spare my family's life? And so they said, yes. Because of your great courage, because of your love for God, we will protect you and we will spare your family. This could have costed Rahab her life. She's going against her town, and she's protecting and hiding these men in her roof. She was willing to risk it all because she trusted that her God was going to come through. This was a God-given, strong courage that she had that welled up inside of her. I imagine that Rahab was living in some shame, right? She knew what she was doing wasn't right, but she rose above that. She dug down in her heart and she asked God to give her some courage. And so Joshua and his army are able to see God move in a mighty way. They take over the land of Jericho, and Rahab's life is saved, her and all of her family. And it says they were actually uprooted and placed firmly in another town, protected and saved. And you might have a story similar to Rahab. You might have a past, some things going on in your life, an infidelity, a broken marriage, something that you've done. And you can either let your sin dictate your future, or like Rahab, you can dig down deep and be courageous and have strong courage and allow God to use you despite the mess that's going on around you. And what all of these women have shown us tonight is it takes great strength to overcome what life throws at us. And strength is not the absence of troubles, right? It's not the absence of pain in our life. Strength is choosing to overcome even in the midst of your hurt and your pain. Your story might not be exactly like these women, but you've got a story, right? You have a testimony, you have a past, and you have a very real present right now. Some of you are feeling wounded tonight. You feel hurt. You've been wronged. You've been broken by circumstances. You've struggled, and I'm sorry for what you've experienced. I know if I sat across the table from you tonight, your stories would break my heart. Maybe you're hurting because of your own choices. You're experiencing some consequences of your own sin. I've been there. And just because you've caused it on yourself doesn't mean the pain's not real. Doesn't mean it doesn't still hurt and it's not very real. Either way, we've all got some things in our life that have caused us some pain and some suffering, and we've got a choice in it all. We can either choose to stay stuck, or we can allow God to step in and give us some courage and some strength like he did for these women. And it'll come in so many different ways. You might think that God can't do some things in your life because of the current circumstances that you're in, but he's saying, I can come and bring exactly what you need in this moment. I can bring you some strength. I can bring you some strong courage. I can bring you some strong hope. I can bring you some strong faith. I can bring whatever you need in this moment. And I think of the women that are here tonight from Awakening's house. It's a sober, yeah, they're all right here. It's a sober women's house right here in our town. And what I love about these women is that they didn't choose to stay stuck in their mess. They didn't choose to stay stuck in their addictions. They said, I'm going to do something about it. And the stories that I've heard from these women, it's incredible. Because God's doing a work in their life. And Carla and Amy, man, I honor you so much for what you're doing with these ladies. And what they have done, I know Carla's story, it's incredible. She's used her mess to impact and change the lives of women around her. She's used her past to propel her into her future, to launch a sober women's house for women. She could have stayed stuck in her mess, but she said, no, I'm going to allow God to come bring some healing in my life, and then I'm going to use this for his glory. I'm going to ask the band to go ahead and come up. And I think of all of these women tonight. I think of the 3 women that we've learned about. And don't worry, I'm not done yet. We got a lot more, but I just want them to go ahead and get in place. These women that we've learned about tonight, these women from Awakening's house, they might have thought at times their issues were too much to be healed. You might feel the same way. You might feel like your story's too much. It's too big of a mess. It's too big of a grief. It's too big of a sorrow. It's this weakness, and it's just holding me back. It's prohibiting me from being used by God. But we've seen how they didn't let their circumstances hold them back, right? They didn't walk around in defeat. If we walk around in defeat, we're never going to get anywhere in our lives. The Bible tells us in 2 Corinthians 12:9, but he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses so that Christ's power may rest on me. And this is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong. And I'll add to that, you can delight in your grief, in your pain, in your hurt. That doesn't mean it's good or it's fun. But you know that when you're weak, Christ is strong in our lives. And we can look at our weaknesses and our hard moments in our lives as opportunities for Christ's power to come and shine in our lives. Because the devil wants you to feel opposite, right? He wants you to stay stuck in your hurt. He wants you to stay stuck in your pain. He wants you to feel hopeless. He wants you to feel addicted. He wants you to feel the guilt and the shame and the heartache and the grief. He has come to destroy us. He doesn't want you to move forward in your life. Let's look at this scripture in 1 Peter 5. Be alert, of sober mind. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. So resist him, standing firm in the faith, because you know that the family of believers throughout the world is undergoing the same kind of sufferings. He's saying here, you're not alone. You're not alone. Others are experiencing what you're experiencing as well. And the God of all grace, who called you to his eternal glory in Christ, after you have suffered a little while, will himself restore you and make you strong and firm and steadfast. To him be the power. He's just reminding us there at the end, it's not about you. It's not about you. To him be the power. And this is what God will do for us. We're going to suffer in our lives. We're going to have hard moments. We're going to have some grief in our lives. It's going to happen. We're going to fail. But he's saying, stand firm. Stand firm and resist the devil, and I will make you strong. God will give you the strength to rise above your circumstances. And when you do, then you can stand on top of them, and you can stand on your failures. You can stand on your circumstances, and you can rise above them. And he will always make you strong. And our strength, it has nothing to do with us, but it has everything to do with him. Everything to do with what he's doing in our lives. The scripture doesn't say, go get strong on your own. He says, God will make you strong. And this is what I've realized in my life, that God's not waiting on me to get it together. He's not waiting on me to suck it up and get it together. He's not waiting for the pain to subside. He's not waiting for the grief to go away. He's not waiting for you to fix the anxiety in your life. He's saying, bring it to me and I will make you strong. I think that becoming strong starts with a surrendered heart. It starts with surrendering your heart to Jesus and laying it all at his feet. Every hurt, every issue, every pain, every moment of your life. And when you do that, you're able to say, hey, look at me. Look what God's done in my life. I'm standing on top of these issues in my life. Let me tell you my story. Let me tell you what God did. Let me tell you how I was addicted and hurting and broken and how my God came and made me strong. Let me tell you how I've been through hell and back. And God came and he met me in this moment and he gave me strength to overcome it. Ladies, this is what he wants to do for you tonight. He does not want you to stay stuck in your past. He does not want you to stay stuck in your hurt, in your grief. It's real and it's there. But now you have a choice to say, now what? Now what, God? Am I going to surrender this to you? Ladies, God will not leave you hanging, not for a single moment. He's not going to leave you. He's going to be in every situation, every single step of the way. And what I believe is that the greater the pain in your life, the greater the power of God's redemption story in your life. You think your mess is too much? And he's like, nah, that's just a greater opportunity for me to shine in your life. That's just a greater opportunity for me to do a bigger redemption story in your life, for me to restore so much more in your life. So the question is not tonight, God, can you do something? It's will we surrender it to him, and will we allow him to come and meet us in the middle of our mess, meet us in the middle of our hurt, meet us in the middle of our pain, and do something in our lives. And I want to just give you a moment tonight to answer that question. Will you surrender some things to him? Will you lay down that grief to him? Will you lay down that depression to him? Will you lay down that sin to him? Will you lay down that addiction to him? And will you allow him to come and meet you in this moment and start to turn some things around for good?
Thanks for watching today. If you'd like to continue the conversation, you can like us on Facebook or follow us on Instagram. If our church has had an impact on you and you'd like to support what Jesus is doing here, you can do so by going to rise-church.com/give and select the giving option that best suits you. Thanks for watching online and have a great week.